If you're a wealthy Mexican American that got rich off of a racist system, you're not going to want to let that go. It's self-preservation. You want to do what's good for you and your family, and you'll screw over your own people for the sake of profit. And again, that this ties more to capitalism.
And you're listening to the Brown Perspective. This is Eduardo, and I'm here with the one and only RO.
Hey, what is happening?
Not much, man. Since there's nothing really going on in the world, I thought that we could talk a little bit about critical race theory.
Yeah, it's not like we're about to declare war on Russia for potentially invading the Ukraine. No, nothing really going on. So we're just that's all light stuff that doesn't matter, right? I guess.
Omnicron, we don't know what's going to do to our bodies, but it's out there.
Yeah.
But we're really worried about our minds and what's going on here around the debate around race. And I think it's important for us to talk about critical race theory and some of the, I guess, offshoots of what's going on. In some ways, I see the critical race theory and its critique as a response to the Black Lives Matter and some of the, I guess, greater awakening around racial inequality that we had during the 2022 terrible year that seems like it's still going on because I mean it's race is always there and it's such a big part of not only of the American experience but I think the global experience too.
Yeah, and why don't you break down the process of how it is that we got here? Because I think it was a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, that I started hearing about this for the first time. And I started hearing more in terms of the pushback against it. And I was hearing things like we protest that we can't be teaching critical race theory in the classroom, like if it's this way of radicalizing people to turn them anti-American, to divide people. The way that I see it, and I think this article captures it, captures this the essence of what of at least how I interpreted it at the time, was a theory that says that racism is part of everyday life. So people, white or non-white, who don't intend to be racist can nevertheless make choices that fuel racism. So at least when I started hearing about critical race theory and I looked into it, this is what I got out of it. Even if these weren't the way that it was described at the time, this is what I got from it. So I thought, what's the controversy behind this? That was me. But again, this is possibly me being biased because I am Mexican American. So obviously, something like teaching about, or maybe my experience as a Latino makes it obvious to me that why this is something like common sense. But let's try to break down where all of this pushback and anti-sentiment comes from.
Yeah, I think one big, oh man, where to start? As I'm trying to say, as I'm trying to think of what the point to start. It's difficult. I mean, it's ever since uh ancient times, I guess you can say, where the
Damn, we're
concept of
we're going back that far.
ever since Babylon,
I only
bro.
got I only got 15 minutes. I'm just how
Well,
much
more
time you got,
recently,
buddy?
I think more recently, I think it was one response, a backlash to
The,
President Barack Obama getting elected.
yeah,
The feeling that people who are in power are losing their power. I think it's also a response to what was a very moving, expiring, and touching coming together of so many people in 2022.
hmm,
Not 2022, that's next year. What am I talking about?
you're
2020.
thinking about the
And
future, man. Nothing wrong with
that's
that.
right. We are in December.
Yeah.
And but the way that people came together against racism and against what happened against the murder of George Floyd, but all the other murders that we have witnessed since then. And I think in some ways this is the right's response to that Black Lives Matter movement. And it's just CRT is such a convenient way to package so many things that people are afraid of. And and again, nothing there's nothing that scares people more than what their kids are learning at school.
So CRT has now become the umbrella term, and all of these other issues are going to coalesce into it. LGBT rights, Black Lives Matter, and diversity training, telling people that they may be biased, even if they don't think that that's the case. Yeah, and I agree with you. You could point back to when Obama was elected, and then you can look to all of the progress that has been made for, especially for the LGBTQ community. And I suppose that's you get this sentiment from a segment of the population that they feel that their way of life is. I know they're very hyperbolic, and they say that they're being destroyed, right? That their culture is being destroyed. But there are changes that are coming, and I mean we've been open about saying that we think that those changes are beneficial for all of us if we become more diverse, if we become more understanding. But again, we're biased because we have everything to gain by having a society like that. Uh, Equality, right? Equality of opportunity, and which we hope translates to also to equality of outcome. But there's a lot of people that they may not want to admit it, or they may not even be aware of it. But equality now means that you're on the same you're starting from the same point as say a black person or a Hispanic, which means now you have to compete with them. And with the economic downturn that we've had since 2008, that scares a lot of people. Not only are they now just not only are they competing with other white America within like the bubble of privilege that we've always known that exists. Now they have to compete. Now they're on the same footing with groups that historically were discriminated against. So I suppose all of that plays into it. That's happening. That's the change that they fear. And now critical race theory is just like the next attack, right? Attack on their way of life.
It is, and I think you're right. I mean, in essence, it is about economics. It's about the fact that a lot of people are struggling, are being left behind by the economy, and in part because if you're poor, you don't have access to the type of education that you need to compete in this new economy and to compete internationally, globally, not only with talented people who live in the United States, but from other countries across the world. So I think it's a very real anger and to an extent pretty justifiable because I think there are policies that have not helped working class folks, whether they're of color or white. So I think that that does have a lot to do. And when you historically, when you look at, you know, the the rise of the Third Reich and everything that was happening out in Germany, was a lot of it was driven by that economic turmoil after the war and the desire to find a scapegoat. And go ahead, because I forgot my train of thought.
Yeah, no,
Choo choo.
I was going to ask you because I saw this right here. How do we go from what I read, which is again something that seems to be common sense, that racism is part of everyday life, and even people who don't intend to be racist can nevertheless make choices that feel racism. If people look, if you're talking to someone and you can't even agree on this being common sense, then you have a long night or a long conversation or process ahead of you because you're starting from a different reference point than that other person. And for me, this makes perfect sense. Not even because I'm Mexican American and because I'm saying that white people are racist. This just makes sense to me because I know how racist Mexicans are. So
Hmm.
I know that people can be racist even when they think that they're not. I'm not even looking to whites to accuse them. I'm looking within my own group. So I understand this to be a truism. And so how do we go from this to all of a sudden saying that critics picking up on this argument that critical race theory says that all white people are racist? Maybe this is, I don't want to say like a flaw in this discussion. But if anything, we should include. I know I know that the word race and racism is sometimes exclusively reserved for systems, oppressive systems, and those that are not empowered, they say can't be racist. But certainly other groups can discriminate against other groups, and so
It's true, but I think right what it's not about, and I think the sentence that you highlighted tries to get at this, but it's not about the individual choice. It's not whether or not you're racist, right? Because you can be white or light skinned Latino and be racist as hell, or maybe you're light skinned Latino and you're not racist. So it's not so much about the choices that you make, it's about the systems, the institutions, it's about the fact that maybe you can't get access to loans, that you don't have access to educations, that you're incarcerated. So it's not that white people are racist, is that the systems that were set up to benefit white folks and the elite and the rich are racist unto themselves, just like
but
the institution of slavery
right,
was an institution.
but even that is really hard to explain to people because these systems, they're run and they're operated by people,
Yeah.
and the people that are within these systems that are the cogwheels of it, they don't think that they're racist. They don't realize that their actions are perpetuating a system that has historically benefited a specific segment of the population. And so that's how you get to a lot of people that say, well, I have black friends, I have Hispanic friends, I go to work, I work with Hispanics, so I'm not racist, this is all BS. But then that same person puts a job opening, he gets 10 resumes, and two of them have names that sound like it's a black person, and those resumes are mysteriously pushed aside. That those people are less likely to get a call. And this has been proven with studies. If you send out a resume, the same qualifications, everything's the same. You just change the name from a black sounding name to a white sounding name, you're more likely to get called back if you're white. Yet the people in the office that are making these decisions, that are pushing those resumes aside because they sound black, they may not even realize that they're doing this. And
Yeah.
I mean, some of them might realize it, and then they tell you that they're not racist and they're full of BS. But other people may not realize it, and when they're telling you that they're not racist, they may genuinely think that they're not. But I suppose this is where critical race theory comes in and says, no, dude, wait a minute. Like, a lot of the things, a lot of what you do is based on your upbringing, is based on your biases, and so you can act racist even if you don't think you are. That's right. So again, that's like very common sense for me to understand, and also because I've witnessed it. I mean, I've witnessed it. I've been in situations where somebody was disqualified. I remember for my company a long time ago, they were looking for a voiceover, not an actor, but someone to do a voiceover commercial. It was like a 30-second
Hmm.
commercial. And when they were reviewing the different submissions, one of them was from an African American guy, and he was dismissed. He was dismissed because his voice sounded too ethnic. And this goes back to the Dave Chappelle comment that he made about universal appeal, right? But if
Hmm.
you were to talk to the people that dismissed this African American guy, they tell you they're not racist. They just find a way to justify it. Oh, well, we can't get somebody that sounds black because we want to appeal to a larger audience. So that justification gives them a pass, and it makes them think that they're not racist, that they're trying to do what they need to do to maximize profits for the company. And all of a sudden it gives them a nice way of a nice cover. And so that's why this is really tricky. And a lot of the times, if you try to point this out to people, they get very defensive, right? And they recede into this corner, looking for protection there, and then they start using all these excuses and trying to hide behind it. When in reality, that's really at the bottom of it. It's just the guy didn't get the job because he sounded black, and for whatever reason, again, systemic racism says that if you sound black, then you're not going to sell as much. Your whatever it is that you're doing, the voiceover is not going to be as widespread or as successful in its reception.
Yeah. Which is which is a lie, of course. No, but I think because it also depends because I think when you think about some of the uh, some of the great voices like Earl Jones and some of these folks who are African Americans and have been popular because of their voice and because they are unapologetically black and they also have crossover appeal. But that's not the point that I wanted to make. I think the point that I wanted to make was that you're right. I mean, we all have biases, we all have unconscious bias, and that's natural. But I think it is that the fact that now there's training, there's greater awareness about how you can avoid those types of situations like the one that you described, where you have a diverse group of people and you try to the best extent possible, try to remove bias or at least be conscious of that bias as you make those selections. But that's the point, I think, because there's been greater awareness about the institutions and how racism has been institutionalized and the fact that so many people again marched on the streets in support of Black Lives Matter. So many companies decided to change their approach, to invest money, to change logos. I think that there's just this fear that more people are being awakened to the fact of their privilege and what's really going on. And the reality is like we need to face yes, we're not responsible for what our predecessors did, but we are certainly responsible for the choices that we make that we make going forward. But also we're responsible for learning more about the history, right? Because I think that's the problem. Like so much of the U.S. history has been has been taught through this rose lens. So it wasn't until is it Robert Sen, his his book on the history of America, and it's not until recently, until the 2019 when the 1619 project came,
Mm-hmm.
that we continue to learn more about the histories and some of the messed up things that continue to impact how we live our lives, how we interact with each other, and how systems are set up that impact our lives. So whether it is the incarceration, whether it's immigration reform, whether it's xenophobia and attacks against Asians, it's all part of our history, both the United States, the continent of America, and the globe, really.
To some degree, this isn't to defend the population that are pushing back on critical race theory, but like, I can see why a lot of people would push back on it because from their point of view, they're nothing like their parents. They're nothing like their grandparents. They have nothing to do with their ancestors and what they did. They're just Americans. They probably do have black friends, Hispanic friends. They just want to work and raise their families and be safe. And so for them, there are a lot of the times the argument is, what the hell are these people complaining about? We don't have the type of racism that we had back then. Things are a lot better. Can we just stop talking about race? I mean, it's bad, but it's not as bad because what they're doing is they're comparing it to before. It's like we don't have slaves anymore. This isn't the '60s, and so they try to make that. It's just a justification, right? Like it's like intellectually lazy. It's not really doing the hard work of trying to understand that in societies everything is relative. Like today's generation of African Americans, they don't have the fear of, at least it's not a widespread fear of being lynched. There's not a widespread fear of mobs coming after you and killing you. That if that happens, there will be some justice. Like some white people will go to jail if that happens. But the black people, they're not comparing the current station in life, their current situation. They're not comparing it to the 1960s when blacks were being lynched. They're comparing it to their peers and to the freedoms that everyone else has. And so when they get pulled over by the police officers, and when the police officer instigates, and then the police officer uses that as a justification to rough up the individual, and then even shoot him and kill him, that's an indignation. And that's
Mm-hmm.
an indignation relative to what's not happening to everyone else. That's not happening to white people. So sure, I mean, black people are not being lynched by mobs. They're still being killed by police officers. The police killings are pretty bad in that sense. But then the justification comes that, oh, well, it was a criminal. Why was he resisting arrest? Why was he doing all these things? Again, they miss the whole point. The point is not that the person may have been a criminal, that it may have had a warrant and all these things. The point is that had that been a white person, the chances are that a white person would not have been killed. And so the indignation and the reason why people can't just like, oh, can't just people forget about racism doesn't exist, can just people move on, the truth is no, they can't move on because things are not equal yet. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not about the fact that people are not being lynched anymore or that there are no more slaves. No, the things are still not equal. Even if a big segment of the population thinks that groups have made incredible progress in the last 60 years, yes, that's true, but things are still not equal.
It's funny because in some ways critical race theory became an issue recently because of the Virginia election and the governor, the Republican candidate there, using critical race theory as a boogeyman, and
Mm-hmm.
then kind of, I guess, getting the suburban moms, white moms, to say, "Oh, why are they teaching my kids in school?" Which is not being taught at elementary level, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is a sort of a theory that is very academic that your kid is probably not going to have to learn until uh, get into college. I mean, some lucky few maybe get some of this um, content in high school. But the point being that to the example that you just did, like there's white parents worried about their kids learning about how bad their ancestors were to black people, and at the same time you have black parents with kids of the same age who do need to have that conversation, who do maybe are in the back of the car while their parents get pulled over or get treated differently to and suffer some of those indignities. So to your point, things are not equal. And the fact that things are not equal is because you had the institution of slavery for so long, right? And in the ways that this country, that we have benefited from the free labor, well, first of all, the free land, the free labor, um, the resources from other parts of the world. But as it relates to slavery, African Americans and their ancestors built this country. They built the capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't get compensated for that, right? So all that wealth is it's we have enjoyed as a nation. So I think part of the conversation is we need to learn that history, and we need to also learn that there's been also instances where they have not been able to access those benefits. Imagine, even as now that we're celebrating this week, we're celebrating the 80th anniversary of World War II. To think, and a lot of the progress that was made around the um, civil rights back in the before the 60s and towards the 60s, in large part was driven by black and Mexican veterans who put their life on the line, not only for the United States, for the entire world. They go fight, they do these amazing things. And also Asians, let's not forget that there were Asians, Native Americans, and so many others that were involved in World War II. And then they come home and they get treated like shit. They
Yep.
don't get access to the GI Bill. They can't buy the homes that in the neighborhoods that would have set up their their generations for years to come. But you cannot unlearn to fight for yourself, and you cannot unlearn um, that feeling of liberty that they felt while they were in Europe and other parts. All that to say that we just need to be, as there's greater awareness about that, I think that we all would start making choices and supporting choices that need to be made at the federal level to right the wrongs of that our country has done. And
Uh,
I'm off of my soapbox right
No,
now.
no, totally agree. And if anything, if parents are concerned that their kids are being taught a little more critical thinking in terms of analyzing the past exploitation of their ancestors and how it's still pervasive today, then if anything, these parents should push for more critical thinking in school, for teaching the kids more about, let's not just go and dissect the history of the United States and actually pay more attention to the exploitation, to the brutality, because I mean slavery has always been taught in high school and in middle school, but it was whitewashed. I suppose critical race theory is trying to put a magnifying glass more into the way that that's taught, and in the way that it's linked all throughout society, right? So again, that's just promoting the people to think more critically about our past. Let's get them to also think more critically about the way that corporations have exploited not just black people and brown people, but white people in this country too. That it was corporations that shipped the jobs overseas. So, people
Hmm.
shouldn't get distracted with the fact that their kids are learning and becoming better, more aware about the past of their country and about race and so forth. They should also push for more critical thinking in other areas as well. Because the
I
truth is that as much as all these people think that critical race theory is a threat to them, to their way of life and everything, the biggest threat has always been that their jobs were shipped overseas, that we are in continuous wars overseas, creating more and more terrorism, that the country is going bankrupt, that we keep going into massive debt, interest rates are at 0%, healthcare is unaffordable. I mean, those are the things that are having a material impact on people's lives, not the fact that your kid could be learning about to become a better person by understanding the history of his or her ancestors. And this whole thing that it feels like it's an attack on white people. Well, then look, uh, if that's how they feel, then I would be for critical race theory also exploring racism within the Mexican community, also exploring racism within the black community, between lighter skinned black people and darker people. Because even going back to the days of slavery, there was this separation, right? And the lighter skinned black people had some benefits.
But
Throw
yeah, but that's because of the overarching uh structure or the emphasis on race, right?
Right,
So
right. But I mean, if we have a system, if we have a system with certain benefits, and it dishes out those benefits to people based on skin color, and
exactly.
then again, that doesn't mean that people within those black and Hispanic groups also didn't benefit from that, and they themselves then start perpetuating those systems. So
Because it
let
was a system that was in place and
and
that they were trying to.
it benefited them too. I mean, at the end of the day, self-preservation, right? If you're a wealthy Mexican American that got rich off of a racist system, you're not going to want to let that go. It's self-preservation. You want to do what's good for you and your family, and you'll screw over your own people for the sake of profit. And again, that this ties more to capitalism, where efficiency is more of a synonym for exploitation of human labor and land and resources.
Well,
But
yeah, but I think what that's one of the points that the 1619 project makes, that in essence slavery is foundational to capitalism, right? So when you think about it, the capitalist system would function great if people across the world could continue working in a condition of slavery, and many have, right? When you think about the reason why factories and work was taken from the U.S. to China and to other Asian places was because they could get cheap labor, right?
yeah,
Why has have a lot of t-shirts been made in Bangladesh and other poor countries? Because they know that people are desperate there and they can pay them cents to work, right?
I mean, and
So
if anything, it's probably even better because you don't have to worry about your slaves getting sick and dying. If your workers are sick and die, then you just go and get new workers to replace them with, because there's always a pool of needy people that need jobs if you've created conditions where there's a lot of poverty. So if anything, our modern capitalist system is an improvement for the capitalists. It's an improvement on slavery in one way. And again, this is me like being a little facetious.
But you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter because your kids are just watching TikTok right now.
Yeah. Uh,
Buenas,
yeah, that's right.
buenas.
All right, let's wrap it up here. Great discussion. I think there's definitely more to talk about here. We're going to see this play out in the next few years. Again, I just people out there don't lose sight of the bigger picture. I think if the more we learn about each other, the more diversity we have, the better we're able to get along and understand each other. The real, I mean, this is more of a let's think more in terms of class struggle and against the wealthy corporations that are getting even more and more power. It's insane how powerful some of these corporations have become.
Yeah, preach, RO. But I think real quickly, I think that's part of why the US, why the American continent in some ways represented the opportunity to get that freedom because in some ways it was the opportunity from people and poor people in Europe who were being oppressed either economically or religiously to come to a new place to fight the inhabitants of the land and steal the land, but in the process build a better future for themselves
Mm-hmm.
and all these things. So that's the thing. Like our story, the story of the world, is complicated. It's hurtful. It's painful, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't learn about it. That we shouldn't grow from it, right? And acknowledge those times where bad things have been committed. Sometimes bad things being committed for the name of religion and so many other reasons, and racism, etc. But bottom line is that we just need to continue to live to the ideals that we profess we have in the United States, and that in some way serve as a beacon of
Beacon.
hope, beacon, beacon of hope, and one of the reasons why, yes, like the one of the reasons why people die to come to the United States, one of the reasons why there's so many Central Americans and Haitians marching and trying to make it across the Rio Grande is because there's opportunity here, and if we realize that we there's plenty of opportunity to go around, not only here in the United States, but across the country, so
That's right.
across the world.
Well
I'm
said.
sorry.
All right. So let's wrap it up there. If you all out there enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. Nos vemos.